Call the meeting to order. We'll begin with a moment of silent prayer and then the pledge. Please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a quorum. Do I need to do a regular roll call?
It looks like Mr. Smisek is the only individual not present.
Okay. All right, the affidavit of posting. This is a meeting of the Washington County Board of Supervisors. Prior to this meeting, public notice was given by posting a copy of the agenda in the office of the county clerk and emailing the agenda to the West Bend Daily News, which is the official newspaper. In addition, the agenda was emailed to CNI newspapers, Express News, the Kewaskum Statesman, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, WIBD, WNBZ Radio, and WTKM Radio. The above action is in conformity with the state of Wisconsin's open meeting law. We'll begin with the consent agenda. Entertain a motion, Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Dice. Any questions? Supervisor Bishop.
I'm still not getting anybody up on appointments. Are we appointing anybody?
Not yet.
Okay.
That's just a placeholder right now. We're getting there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And that's what Supervisor Schleifer, that was your question also? Okay, yeah, it's a placeholder right now. We're still going through. With that, I'm still waiting for a number of supervisors, if they have interest in committees, to please email me or Takara so that I can fill those all out. So you should have received an email. Just please respond back to it. Thank you. All in favor of the consent agenda, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Personal appearances, letters, and other communications. I'm going to be introducing our new court judge, Sandra Giernoth. First met her at one of the Elevate meetings, and I was so impressed with her knowledge of the law, with her ability to articulate the law and answer questions, and I think she is going to make a fine judge. So here she is.
Thank you. Good evening. I wanted to take the opportunity.
There you go.
I'll start again. Good evening. I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce myself in person. So thank you for having me, and thank you for the warm introduction. For those of you who may not know, I just took the bench, so is how we refer to it, as of April 12th. So I'm just over a month having served as Circuit Court Judge for Branch 4. My predecessor was Judge Andrew Gonring, who I'm sure many of you know. He served for over 20 years, I believe, and then retired at the end of March. So I was selected as his replacement and have been doing my best to fill his shoes ever since. I just wanted to take the time to let you know a little bit about myself. I currently reside in the town of Jackson with my family, my husband Jeff, and my 2 kids. We live in the town of Jackson and have been in Washington County since 2008. My daughter Bryn is 8 and currently attends Fair Park virtually, but will be finishing the 2nd grade this spring, going into the summer. My son Kate is 5, and I'm hoping we'll start some semblance of a normal kindergarten in the school district this fall. The justice system now looks a little bit different than it did in January and February when the application process for filling Judge Gonring's vacancy was going on. But I just wanted to give you some idea as to how I'm adapting and how the judges generally are adapting to having ongoing business in the Washington County Circuit Court. You're probably aware that judges have a lot of independence and control over how they choose to run their courtrooms. And that exists both independently amongst the 4 of us, but also county by county, meaning circuit court by circuit court. And some circuit courts have taken the approach that virtually all business needs to stop for the meantime and are addressing emergent requests for cases sort of on a case-by-case basis. Our approach here in Washington County has been somewhat different. We are attempting to do business to the extent possible within the confines of the requirements of the law and utilizing the technology that's available to us. So many of you probably recall the investment the county made in updating the technology equipment in the circuit court in all 4 branches. Your investment has paid off well. I can tell you that because we are using it on a daily basis, multiple times a day, for purposes of conducting both telephone appearances and hearings and video appearances and hearings. So I would have told you in January of this year that I had never seen a prosecutor appear via video in the 10 years that I have spent as a prosecutor in the DA's office. I can tell you now, sitting for a month as a circuit court judge, that I've seen a prosecutor in person in my court twice. So those are some of the differences that we're experiencing right now, trying to still do business in a safe way, but utilizing the resources and technology that we have. Going forward, all of the judges I know are considering how to potentially reopen courts when the Supreme Court allows in-person appearances. As you may know, in-person appearances were suspended indefinitely as of April 15th. We will get some guidance from the Supreme Court as to when we can have in-person appearances again. But I know that all of the judges are considering how to do so safely. For me, I'm focusing on new methods and techniques to minimize contact between individuals that come to the court system, that when they come to court for a necessary purpose, that I'm limiting how much contact people have with each other by employing physical distancing tools, basically keeping people separate in the courtroom by a minimum of 6 feet, and then utilizing available sanitation processes in the courtroom to make sure that we are sanitizing as frequently as we can to prevent contamination or infection by touching surfaces and things to that effect. So that's what I wanted to do to introduce myself and to give you an idea as to what the first 30 days that I have served as a judge have looked like. But I'd like to offer an opportunity for questions if you have any.
Supervisor Bossert?
I just want to let you know, as of about an hour ago, the Supreme Court struck down everything was safer at home. So it's a victory for freedom, but it puts a responsibility on us personally to make sure that we're being responsible and not spreading this disease. So many of the practices you put in place, you'll probably want to continue those practices you put in place. We'll still want to be safe and responsible, but it's a victory for freedom. So just want to make sure you know that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I heard that as I came in.
Did you? Okay.
Just as I came in, so. Are there any other questions?
You see none, let's give Judge Giernaut the warm up. Okay, consideration upon request reading of resolutions and ordinance. 2020 Resolution 1, return to Washington County elected official salary to Washington County. Take a motion to approve. Supervisor Bossert, Supervisor Kelly. This was brought up in with Josh isn't here to explain it, was brought up at executive committee. Supervisor Mary brought it up. This will be a completely voluntary and anonymous, but as our employees of Washington County are getting a 5-day furlough, we're looking at a $3.5 to $5 million deficit. I think it's something we can all do to help alleviate that. It's not much, but it's something. So what we're requesting is that we're going to strongly encourage supervisors to give back to the county a 1 week salary. It's not going to be taken off your check. It would have to be written in as a check. There should be something coming through finance to allow you guys to know exactly what to do. Do you have anything? I saw an email today. Margie, you want to speak to that?
We did provide some information today to both Chairman Creefall and County Clerk Ashley. So we can forward that information on to you so that you know how to volunteer those wages back to us with the process that we're using.
Okay. Are there any questions Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you. So this resolution is strictly endorsement, or to encourage not only county board members, but all elected officials.
Yes, correct. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
We legally cannot furlough any of these elected official
No.
positions. Okay.
No.
Just wanted to kind of point that out. That's why this is a option that we're encouraging only. It will, in his elected position, we're not really hourly or daily type people. Well, how do we calculate out what 5 days pay for elected officials?
I think Supervisor Mahalik had that figured out. I think he came up with $127, which is 1/52 of the salary that we have. Mine will be a little bit higher. My salary's a little higher, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Supervisor Goddard, did you have one?
Yeah, I guess, I'll wait for Mike. I know I got a big enough voice. I guess, besides this, you said that we're gonna be behind so far in money-wise. What else are we intending to do? Are we gonna intend not to do some roads in order to save some of that? Are we intending to do other things? Not
There's,
spend as much on the park systems, not spend as much on the golf systems, whatever.
we're looking at a number of options. Some of the options are going to be some of the reserve fund. It's gonna have to be tapped into. And there's gonna be some things CIP are gonna be pushed back, that we won't be spending that money on that. All the revenues have, when Josh talked about flat revenues, well, they've absolutely cratered. So we're looking at, we don't know exactly when that's even gonna come back.
The reason I ask is because Wasaki County did this a few years back, when they were starting to run into a little bit of a problem. And they did the furloughing and asked elected officials to give something back and everything else. What really happened, they got the furloughs, they did all of that, but they ended up working on Fridays and Saturdays when they normally wouldn't do that, because they couldn't get all the work done. And this was mainly highway department, because they didn't change what they were doing with the highways. They didn't get rid of any roads being built, ditches being done, or anything like that. They kept on doing it. So I hope that we're not gonna get into that same boat where they were in at one point.
No, hopefully, by the way this is structured, the furlough program, we'll be talking about that later, is 1 day at a time. It's gonna be worked through each department, so it won't leave them short. We'll make sure they can continue to work and provide the services and response to the citizens, and that is not affected. So, again, some of the projects that we have are not gonna be able to be done this year. And we're still in talks about exactly what that's gonna look like. So,
Thank you.
any other questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Resolution 2022, resolution to extend the COVID-19 emergency response. Look for a motion. Supervisor Galtz, Supervisor Sorcy. Saw you back there. Okay, I'm gonna have, ask Brad to speak to this.
Grab a mic, Brad. You got a mic, Ashley?
You want to just,
Either way. I know. All right.
other way.
I think we got it now. Can you hear me okay? All right, excellent. So what this particular resolution does is it extends the proclamation of emergency that was passed by the county board back in March And I want to be clear about this particular resolution. This does not extend or attempt to extend any sort of safer at home, business shutdowns, anything of that nature. This is strictly an operational function. And what this particular resolution will allow us to do is remain at least in an operational state of emergency such that if federal dollars are available to the county, funding, grants, things of that nature, that we would be able to apply for those things and get that funding to the extent we may need it. Just because the Supreme Court has struck down order number 28 doesn't mean there isn't still a pandemic, doesn't mean still that people shouldn't be careful and that we shouldn't follow recommendations of our health department and so forth. It's still out there, it's still something we have to deal with. This particular proclamation or resolution rather allows us to continue to operate, shift staff around as we might need it, to the extent that we may have to dispatch staff to the health department to do contact tracing and things of that nature. So operationally, this allows us to continue as though the emergency is ongoing. I drafted it such that I'm citing at the bottom statute 323.11. There's no end date on this thing because I felt it was more prudent to quote the statutory language which says the emergency can continue so long as it continues without having to come back month after month and continue to extend. Once the emergency is deemed over or the federal funding dries up or things of that nature, then we could take affirmative action if we wanted to and indicate the emergency is over, or this would simply just expire. It gives you that flexibility.
Supervisor Mahal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to add one whereas. Basically, Brad had mentioned it, and I was going to suggest anyway, that given the information that was all given us as we were literally coming to this meeting, and it would go most likely on line 23, so between 22 and 24, and that is, whereas the Wisconsin Supreme Court has struck down Wisconsin Executive Order number 28 as unconstitutional. I would just like that added to show another reason why we believe it necessary, and that's not in there.
It didn't strike Order 28 down as unconstitutional, just so you're clear. They struck it down based on the fact that Andrea Pullum did not follow proper statutory procedure in getting the order passed. They believe she has the power to issue orders, but has to follow the legislative process to get that done. So I want to be clear that you're understanding, so you don't put something in the resolution that isn't.
Okay, that's fine. Then where it struck down the Wisconsin Executive Order number 28 as it was promulgated by an act that did not follow the proper, and then you fill in the word. What do you want, Brandon?
I think the Supreme Court said it was unlawful.
Okay, that's fine, but I would like that added. I don't know if that would be in the motion, if somebody would want to second it.
Second by Supervisor Bosser.
We could say, if you like, whereas the Wisconsin Supreme Court struck down emergency order number 28 as unlawful.
That works.
Is that good with your approval?
Thank you.
So we have an amendment.
Okay. Any other comments to the amendment? Supervisor Galtz?
Not the amendment.
Not the amendment? Anybody to the amendment? Seeing none, we'll vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye on the amendment. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, back to the resolution. Any questions on the resolution? Supervisor Bishop.
I have a little bit of a problem with the open-endedness at the very end, or is likely to exist. I feel more comfortable if we said we would revisit it or revisit in 6 months so we can see where we're at. But to just have it go into perpetuity just doesn't sit well.
Like I said, I just quoted statutory language. You're free to do whatever you like with it. It's a placeholder, if nothing else. You're certainly free to make an amendment to a date you like.
If we make it a 6 month to revisit it, that gets us past the November elections, which would probably be another time. I know our town really appreciated the help that came from the county during the elections. So.
Maybe a friendly suggestion. revisit in 6 months unless the pandemic is ended prior
Ended
to
prior to.
somehow, rather than you have us put out to that 6-month period.
That's- I would agree with that.
I would make it 6 months. I'll back off a second.
Okay.
Should we, you want to just
6
extend it
months.
6 months?
Okay.
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 Extended 6 months.
All right, let me make a
Then
cross
second
out
by-
here and we'll get you some language.
Second by Supervisor Mahalik, it's another amendment. Any other to the amendment, Supervisor Bosser?
This kind of pertains to both the amendment and the resolution. Gotta wait for the microphone. So when we passed our original resolution back in March, I believe that also bestowed emergency powers to our county administrator and executive, and those were set to expire tonight. Does this resolution extend any of those powers, or is this just extending the declared state of emergency?
Yes, it extends the original order so that the executive could work in real time under consultation with the county board chair, and if necessary, the executive committee. Did I have that right, Brad?
Yes. I would indicate also as we come up with some language, I just consulted with Ashley and Josh was over there as well. It may make sense that we revisit this on November 11th, which is the November County Board meeting. So if I amended line 37 to indicate hereby extended until November 11th, 2020.
That works for me.
That way there's a natural date for you all to be together to consider.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm wondering if we feel 6 months is too long, if maybe we should do 3 months and then extend another 3 months. Are you open to a friendly amendment to that effect?
Like the 160, if that's the much. I like this one.
I would stay with the 60 so that we pass the election, just to make sure that, and that's when, they say fall is when it could reemerge. And so that way we know whether we're going to be in that reemergence
Or not? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Any more, Supervisor Marquardt?
This is a question, I guess, to Brad. My concern with continuing to call this an emergency is that we need to get businesses open now and give people the permission to do that essentially. Since the state is now out of play for the most part, people are gonna look to county government to do that. And this body, the county executive, and the sheriff need to send a message to say, we're open for business again. And my concern is having this in place could give insurance companies, for instance, an argument to threaten coverage for businesses that are reopening and things like that. And I just would like your impression as to if those kind of legal questions can remain if we leave this order in place for another 6 months.
Well, as I indicated before, it's certainly not our intent to, at this point in time, or any point in time, to impact the business community with this proclamation and the prior proclamation. This is strictly an operational proclamation for the county so that we can move staff around, we can apply for funding and so on and so forth. In terms of what you're talking about, as you know, Order 28 was struck down, so there's no effect currently on business. Now, that's not to say the legislature couldn't come back tomorrow with the governor and have some other order that it puts in place that is lawful, I don't know. But whether this impacts businesses' ability to operate or not, I can't speak to that necessarily. I just know that from our standpoint, in order to get certain operations done and handled, we need something like this very likely in place so that we can avail ourselves of those types of opportunities to keep operations moving and so on. County Executive Shulman, I think, wants to speak to that as well.
Yeah, so, is this on? Can you hear me? Tomorrow we'll put out a statement that's along the lines of what you're requesting, making it very, very clear that we're open for business and there is no prohibition or order that's gonna be in place that prevents anybody from doing normal operation. We will cite our guidelines, that'll stay in place, but it's really just a guidance document and there's no enforceability to it. What this is, every county across the state's going through this same process. Jefferson County just extended theirs. Waukesha County's was open-ended from the beginning. This allows for, basically think CARES Act money. If we're gonna get CARES Act money, we need to be able to react and get it and then distribute it where we want it. Without this, we have to go through the procedures of the committees and all of that process to be able to do it. So it allows the county to be nimble and at the same time stay away from all the order side of the world, which is what Safer at Home really was. We have, by statute, the public health officer has the ability to still issue orders, which is what your concern is, but there's no intent at this point to do anything of that variety. Those are really two separate actions from one another.
It's more along the lines of a natural disaster.
Correct, exactly. This is very consistent with the natural disaster response.
So will you actually be going into phase 2 as of the plan?
We're in phase 0. It's everything's open and
Okay.
whatever businesses feel comfortable doing, our guidance is going to try to help give them some sense of how to operate in the midst of a pandemic, but there's no rules in place. I mean, there's no orders.
And we're not putting any in place.
And we're not putting any in place. The frequently asked questions document you've read, the blueprint you've read, all of that will be out there for businesses to have something to work off of, but it's not the law of the land. It's simply public health is suggesting if you have a restaurant, follow these 6-foot guidelines, et cetera, and that's it.
Supervisor Kelly?
So.
Thank you. So let's just make sure I have this absolutely clear and that the public has this absolutely clear. All businesses in the county of Washington are now open for business. That we are suggesting certain guidelines and we are hoping that people will obviously understand there still is a pandemic. We want to make sure that to the best of their ability, they are using some common sense that we expect all of our business owners to do as far as cleanliness goes, distancing goes, whatever inventive thing that they can come up with for their business. And I do believe our business people are the best people to come up with good ideas. Necessity is the mother of invention. So to clarify, you are saying that as of this moment, we're open.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Shorsey?
Well, I appreciate that situation about, my head goes off to Mr. Mihalik for opening up Hartford, but the one bad thing about this whole situation is people are going to be gun shy for a while. I see that with some of the other people that deal with it. I mean, it's unfortunate that the situation happened, but people, yeah, I want to get out there. I want to get out there and do my thing. There's a lot of people around who are still going to be sitting back and they feel comfortable, to do their thing. I mean, it's great we're doing it, and it's great that the Supreme Court ruled on it, and it's great, but little by little, people will start edging now. It's going to take a while. Thank you.
Supervisor Kruger-Gondrum?
Well, is this working?
Yep.
I'm looking at a reference to the blueprint of the reopening of Washington and Ozaki. I read it over, and it pretty much mirrors what the governor was saying on page 5. It says, officials should adhere to the safer at home or order until May 26, 2020. Is this the right document I'm looking at? Because I couldn't vote for this knowing that this is the document that it's referencing.
It's not the right, you're not looking at the right document. For what you're voting on, you're only voting on an emergency order, which, as Supervisor Marquardt pointed out, is really similar to an emergency state when there's a natural disaster. What you're looking at is not an order at all. It's really just a guideline.
Okay, so the both referenced as the blueprint for reopening Washington and Ozaki.
We're having two separate discussions right now.
Okay.
The board is getting completely off the public policy question, which tends to happen, but The reason for that is the safer at home order is one order. The emergency declaration you're being asked to deal with is another one, and we're commingling the two. There's actually no commingling. They're completely separate. What you're talking about is the one, what we're asking for a public policy decision on is the other.
So then in the third paragraph, do we need that reference to that blueprint? I'd feel more comfortable without the reference to this document.
I'd move this right.
She's gonna change that tomorrow, it'll be gone tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the other point. The blueprint itself will be modified tomorrow because the one you're reading was printed before 4:30 when there was still Order 26. So we'll have to modify it.
How do I know that when I'm voting?
It's called trust. I mean, why would we put in a document that refers to an order that doesn't exist? That doesn't make sense.
And why reference it in here?
It existed when that was printed.
Can we take it out? That
No,
would be my amendment. Can
no,
we-
you can't take it out.
Wait,
You're not,
remove this.
you're not acting on that document.
It's just references the document. We're not acting.
Right.
We've
It'll
already-
be okay. You'll be able to pass the emergency order and we'll achieve what you're trying.
We've already
Give us
been
the
in
chance to do it.
discussions with this, exactly what's gonna happen if that order is lifted, if the Supreme Court strikes it down. But that document that you have, Supervisor Krieger-Gendron, is
You can call me
prior,
Lois.
huh?
You can call me Lois.
Is prior to, that will be amended to reflect appropriately that our document is it's a recommendation, it's a guide.
The short answer is at 5:45, we were still trying to understand what the court order meant. So there's no way we could have amended the blueprint in time. And we will amend it. I mean,
It's a historic reference.
right,
That's all it is.
correct.
Realistically too, this particular paragraph, what it really was intended to do, if you look at it, was to praise the people of Washington County for doing their part, to honor the governor's order to the best they could, to assist us in being able to move toward flattening the curve, implementing the blueprint at the time. But now there's an FAQ which will be out, if it isn't already, that provides that guidance. So it really was intended more or less to praise the people of Washington County for allowing us to get to this point. So really was meant no more than that. And I know that because I drafted it, so.
Could then we amend it to say, as amended?
You can make any motion you like with regard
Is that-
to.
that's
Well,
motion?
before we have the other, what is the other amendment on the floor now?
6 months.
6 months.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
before we have another amendment, let's take care of the first amendment. Is there any other discussion on the amendment to extend the emergency order to November 11th? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Who said no? Supervisor Krebs is a no. Okay. All right. Supervisor Krieger-Gundrum, would you like to make an amendment?
First, yes, I will. Can we modify that to say for implementation of the blueprint, development, and at the end of after health department, WOPHD, and the amendments, to add it after, the line number 21?
Can I make
Yeah.
I'd like to make a suggestion if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think that all we would need to do to make sure that this is viewed as a historic reference, this particular whereas, as how, that all we would have to do is say, on line 20, Washington, Ozaukee County is developed by the Washington Ozaukee Public Health Department, WOPHD, which was designed to preserve the public's health while simultaneously restoring its economic health. Putting it in the past tense, understanding that's what we did, and giving it that historic perspective, and going to what our attorney stated regarding the fact that it's patting us on the back for doing what we were just going to do, and that's what it is. So that would just, again, well, if you've ever looked at any of these and you see all the whereases, what we're doing is again, just building the historic perspective of what happened. So from when somebody looks back on this, they'll realize what we did prior to actually moving forward with the extension of the proclamation of emergency. So just changing the is to was, I think, actually determines what.
I like the word was in there, and I would think, I would like to see add future amendments to the document.
I don't understand.
Well, you're gonna amend it tomorrow, right?
We can put that in without a motion. We can do that.
Okay.
That's very simple. You're not altering the intent of the resolution, so we can make that change.
Okay.
So then do I need a second on that?
No, you don't need a motion. We'll just do it.
Motion, you
It's
don't,
not changing really the paragraph.
okay,
The intention of the paragraph is going to be.
okay. All right, back to the resolution. Any further discussion on resolution? Supervisor Krebs?
Thank you. Well, I can support this proclamation for the intent that it's been presented as for being able to apply for grant money. Can someone outline to me what powers this grants the health department that they would not have if this order is not extended?
This particular proclamation really has no effect on the health department. This proclamation takes effect under Chapter 323, whereas the health department operates under Chapter 252. They have independent powers, in other words.
So the original proclamation of emergency and possibly this extension grant no powers to the health department, and at any time in the future, they could implement plans as needed by them towards the residents or the businesses of Washington County.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. The health department does have independent power to take whatever measures are necessary to curb the spread of communicable diseases. Whether or not they go too far, or whether or not the powers exercised are appropriate or not, I guess are an argument for another day. But theoretically, they can take measures to implement whatever they believe is necessary. Yes, but that's beyond the scope of this, and there's nothing you can do to alter the statutory language that we have right now, short of what the legislature did with regard to the Andrea Palm
Short of
lawsuits,
us
right?
filing lawsuits.
Potentially, depending on what those orders are and how people react to them. But I after speaking with our public health officer, Kirsten Johnson, who's been before you before, she is a far different creature than some of the other health officers that I think you've heard from and dealt with. She is very pragmatic. She understands the need to keep business running. She understands the balance that we need to strike. We've had conversations with her hours and hours, and it would shock me if she came back and did something that caught us completely out of left field that we took issue with.
So moving past the health department, this document does extend extra powers to the county board chair, the county executive position, and the executive committee, correct?
This particular resolution extends the powers that allowed, at that time, the county administrator to do certain things that may have been outside what he normally would have been able to do without committee approval and without speaking with the county board chair. And now we have a county executive. I would argue much of what he can do in terms of staffing and departments he can do anyway. But what this does do is create that escape valve, if you will, that he still consults with the county board chair. I think in good faith they've reached that agreement, and to the extent there's something that the county board chair has an issue with, it can convene the executive committee to discuss that with the county executive.
With that, during the time period of the original order, this county has engaged in 2 lawsuits that directly or indirectly are related to the COVID issue. As I've spoken with you, Mr. Chairman, I think that this full county board should be discussing and backing up the decision of the executive committee towards those issues, and we have not done that yet. So I have a fear that this is extending the powers to engage in future litigation, and we haven't even discussed the current litigation that we're involved with. So I have a extreme hesitation here to extend an order which on the surface appears like it's a good idea for the grant money or possible grant money that's out there. In my opinion, the idea that there's an emergency that requires fast action, that's passed. Any action now, I think, should go through the proper channels and work through the committee, that it gets to the full board for debate. So at this time, I'm not going to support this resolution.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the resolution. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Can you raise your hands? Nays? You got those? Keep them up. Good, okay.
Did you have a roll call?
You see Supervisor Sorcy in the back? Okay. Motion passes 20-5. Okay. Mandatory furlough program and communication from the county executive, that could be all in one?
Sure, would you like me to present it, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Okay. So hopefully everybody's had some time to review the material that's related to the mandatory furlough program. This went to the executive committee a couple of weeks back, so they've had a chance to opine, and I would ask any of the executive members from that committee meeting who had that information and discussion to feel free to opine as they deem appropriate. As I communicated to staff several weeks ago now when we rolled this out, I take no pleasure in having to roll out a program like this. It saddens me at a certain level. But given the situation of the economics across our state and our county and our nation, I feel the need to do this now. And I also felt that the sooner we did it, the better off our organization would be and the better off our employees would be. We're in the middle of the mandatory furlough program now. It went into effect on May 7th. Really, it's predicated on, at this point, it's predicated on the state of the 2020 budget. The original analysis that was done by Margie Hammers, our finance director, was that the 2020 budget would see a shortfall both of expenses and revenues of about $3 to $5 million. That's a significant impact on our operating budget. And so therefore, we felt the need to do it soon and implement it promptly. What we're asking for you to do today is endorse the plan. There is no need for action, but we felt it was important to have the legislative body and the legislative branch and the executive branch doing this shoulder to shoulder, standing and singing in unison. The employees have already started. As of May 7th, we've already had people starting to take those furlough days. Our expectation is that it will save us up to $500,000. Some of those numbers are fluid based on how exactly things play out, unemployment and things of that nature. But we do anticipate it'll be one thing that helps us. There's a multitude of other things that we're already in the process of doing, stopping some capital improvement projects as an example, some temporary hiring freezes of non-essential type positions, and other items that we'll be looking at as well. So this is one component of a number of components of measures, fiscal measures that we're going to take to try and balance the budget. For 2020, I can tell you that there aren't enough things that we can do to completely balance the budget. So by the end of the year, the audit that you'll read next year at about this time will almost certainly show a deficit at the end of the year, which should give you a little bit of a prelude of what the 2021 budget that you're going to be asked to approve will look like. It likely is going to be very difficult. So with that said, again, I'm asking the legislative branch to affirm the decision of the mandatory furlough program so that we're standing in unison.
Okay, any questions, comments? Supervisor Bishop?
I brought this up at the time of the executive committee meeting, and I'm going to bring it up again. We're asking our employees to give up 5 days pay. They're not going to work those days, they're not going to be paid. But we're also, in here it says employees will not accrue PTO during a furlough. So not only are we asking them to give up 5 days paid, they're giving up vacation time. We're not going to save money by them giving up their PTO, because whether they're at work or whether they're taking vacation, we're still going to pay that PTO. So personally, I think it is wrong to ask them to give up time off as well as giving up part of their pay.
Any other questions or comments? Supervisor Hartwig?
Thank you. Josh, I just, what departments will all be involved? Every department in Washington County here?
So there are only a couple of exceptions, a handful of exceptions. The sheriff's department largely is not involved. The sheriff does have a number of employees that will be furloughed, but there's also a larger number that are not. Samaritan Health Center is largely accepted from the policy, not entirely. There are some employees who will be furloughed. Medical examiner's office and the county treasurer's office. Other than that, I think every department, is that right? I think every other department will be part of the policy.
Well, I have a question, another question for you. I was directly involved with furlough days where I used to work, and we ended up taking furlough days. We found out a lot of guys took the furlough days, and then we didn't have enough help. We ended up working overtime on Fridays, Saturdays. We even worked a Sunday with the highway that we never did before, except if it snowed. And I was just wondering, is this gonna save the county money, or is it gonna cost more by having to get this work done? I know we haven't done much work this year.
As memory serves, there's actually a provision that states that you can't create overtime from taking a furlough. So is it possible that it happens? It's certainly possible it happens. It happens with PTO and sick time all the time, especially in facilities like the Samaritan Nursing Home. And the Highway Department, I'm sure, has some of the same issues. But the answer, generally speaking, is because of the exceptions of the Sheriff's Department and Samaritan, generally that these will not cost overtime or cause overtime. And therefore, yes, it will save the county money. Again, I use the number $500,000 loosely because of things like you're describing. There could be people who file for unemployment. There could be some overtime that's created, but generally speaking, it will save the county money.
Thank you.
Supervisor Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When this came up at executive, I thought about it, spoke about it. It is a really tough thing to do for our employees. It's not something that anybody feels good about having to do. I do believe it is something that is necessary. We ask the public to close down businesses. We ask, a lot of people became, very unemployed permanently, as opposed to just a 5-day furlough. So I think, even though I don't really care for furloughing employees, I have always stated from the day one on this job that we should be acting pretty much like the private sector. When we make expectations of the private sector, we should make those same expectations for us. So that's what we're doing here. The private sector has suffered tremendously, and we're all gonna do a little suffering too. And that's also why I would support taking a furlough from our pay as well, that 152nd that we worked on earlier. I will definitely be doing that. I hope you will join me in that, to show that, look, we're not decreeing anything from on high to our employees. We will put ourselves in that same boat with them. So I hope you all consider that. This is definitely something that nobody takes any joy in, and I'm sure it may ruffle a few feathers as well, but our hope is to show the public that we care about their tax dollars, we care about what we're doing here at the county, and we're all in. So we're not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Supervisor Newman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I want to just make a comment that I agree with Supervisor Belling on the situation that we treat our employees the same way that we're asking the public to treat their employees through the situation. I just ask that we're consistent as much as possible with all the county employees, and that the county board participates in this as well. I heard some comments during the executive committee that concerned me that we can't or may not want to participate. $127. If that means that much to you, then I think you're here for the wrong reason. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? It's not going to be a vote, but why don't we answer in affirmative if we support this. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, you have affirmation. Do you have anything else for the communications? Okay. The next meeting date is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020 at 6 p.m. We're going to take a recess, brief recess, while we get set up for the orientation. I'm going to say that, you have something, Josh? Supervisors that have been here can, if you need to leave, you can. I would appreciate though, and I think the people, the new people would appreciate your insights as to questions they may have and some of your comments that could be helpful to them. So I would hope that everyone would stay to help our new supervisors, because we've got a whole bunch of them. So I'm sure there's going to be lots and lots of questions. So we'll take a brief 5-minute recess. Thank you.
I would respectfully ask you as colleagues to stay as well, even if you've been here for years. Some of this information here is brand new for everyone.
Okay. Well, additionally, the little yellow sheet, they'll just give you that information now. If you can fill these out, leave them for the clerk. Just leave them on your desk. Clerk will collect them. But something for WCA.
They're anonymous.